everyone, and welcome to today's live GFG event. Today we're joined by Brian Skanderbeg, President and CEO, and Anders Carlson, Vice President of Exploration. Today they'll be going over a brief presentation regarding recent results, and then we'll be having a live Q&A session. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we kick off. This event is being recorded, and the replay will be available shortly after we conclude. To participate in the Q&A, you can submit your questions in the chat, in the bottom right corner of your screen there. We'll try and get through all of them today, but if not, I'll be sure to pass along the chat conversation with the GFG team to follow up afterwards if necessary. With that said, Brian, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Kyle, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. Anders and I are going to talk to you about both Aljo, our most recent drill results, and also a brief update on Muskego, which is an exciting target we're going to test in Q1 of next year. Please do think about asking questions. We love this to be interactive, and we're all here for a reason, which is to engage with shareholders and provide you guys a meaningful update. So with that, I'll move forward. Just a caution, Anders and I are explorationists and geologists. We will make forward-looking statements, so I'll refer to you this language on our screen here. So when we think about GFG, and many of you will have heard this story before, in terms of why we do what we are. We set up this company back in 2016, and our goal at that time was really to drive greenfield discovery. And it's been a bit of a journey here, but I think what you're going to see today is a really experienced team and board, very seasoned individuals, technically savvy, that have worked in this business for 20 years. And we've done the hard work of putting together a massive land package in Timmins. 800 square kilometers is a truly district scale opportunity. And it's in a great belt, Timmins. Timmins is one of the world-class camps out there, producing in excess of 75 million ounces in the camp itself. And I think there's a lot more to be found. So when we speak about Aljo, or we think about Muskego, just understand that this is a camp with an immense amount of infrastructure, and this is why we went here 5 years ago, is to find things like Aljo and Muskego. And this concept of a tier 1 mining jurisdiction, it's about the people, it's about the infrastructure, it's about the endowment and the jurisdiction, and it's about the ability to find a new relevant discovery. And I believe Timmins is one of those tier 1 jurisdictions that will offer more as we go forward. And the final point here about GFG is really about being disruptive and being aggressive. And it's not always easy to be aggressive in the junior gold space, because of the capital need and the challenges we face. But I do think that GFG is doing a great job of staying very aggressive, looking differently, thinking differently, adding people to the team, like Anders has been with us for about a year and a half now, and made us a huge difference in our exploration strategies. So these are all the sort of high level points of what GFG is. Before we go into the technical details, there's a few other moving parts in the company, and I think they're quite relevant to us all. So just from a share structure and market point of view, we're about a 35 million market cap company. We've traded very reasonably well over the last 12 months, seeing a good move back in Q3 and further through Q4 in terms of the share price performance. And right now we would find ourselves with around $1.5 million. This $2 million was at the end of September. Now we've been drilling and are actively spending money. The piece that's quite relevant on this slide is we have 30 million warrants, and I think many of you guys will have known we accelerated these back on November 9th, and they had a 30-day time frame to exercise. So ultimately, the 30 million warrants will expire if they aren't exercised by December 9th. We've had exceptionally positive feedback from the vast majority of warrant holders and shareholders here. I expect us to exceed 85-90% of our warrant uptake, and I think that's a really positive thing for the company. It sets us up very well in terms of balance sheet. So when we add the warrants, we're also going to give you a brief update, or we can touch base on Rattlesnake. That's the sale of our U.S. asset, brings more cash into the company both this year and next year, and existing cash. I could see us ending the year with around $6 million in the bank, plus equity and plus cash to come next year. So this is a really strong position to be in, to go test Aljo and to go test Muskego aggressively. GFG's balance sheet is at the end of this year is going to look better than it ever has. The bottom left here is their share structure. I suspect many of you are shareholders. If not, hope you be shareholders after this presentation. Alamos, very large and sophisticated shareholder, upwards of 99% of us. Broad retail base in the U.S., some high net worth individuals that are upwards owning, 20-25% as a combined group. So good, strong shareholders. Insiders still own and buy. Anders, myself, Mark, Patrick, Downey, our chairman, all own relevant pieces of this and have participated lately in the market. So snapshot of the corporate structure, good balance sheet. I think a solid market cap. Technically, the chart looks pretty good. I think we're under some pressure here just on whenever you accelerate warrants, people want to sell to exercise. I do think it's coming out December 9th. We'll probably see the stock back up moving forward. And I do think it's in a good position given the drill bits turning and we're testing Muskego next year and we have a balance sheet that's going to look very robust. So that's a bit of the corporate snapshot side for us. Now, when we go into the technical details of why we work in Timmins, this is a map, very large area. It's about 200 kilometers across this map. But if you just calculated the gold per square kilometer, it's amongst the top 2-3 in the world in terms of endowment. How much gold is in here? How much gold's yet to be found? And chiefly also is how much infrastructure is here, because that really drives the economics of what it takes to find and make an economic ore body here. So GFG has been working in this belt since 2018, but really our time and exposure to this belt even goes back to our time with Claude, where we looked at a lot of corporate potential transactions with some of the producers here. And so we've been looking and studying this belt for the better part of 15 years, and put together 800 square kilometers in Penn. That's a large land position west of Timmins that hosts the Muskego property. Dore, down to the south of it, sits flanked by Cote and Borden, two very large and well-endowed land positions. And Goldarm, which is, the exciting property out east of Timmins where we've been drilling at Aljo. So those are the three key land positions. They're strategically located proximal to a number of pieces of infrastructure. Little call-outs here. Would be infrastructure pieces owned by McEwen or Newmont, Pan American, IM Gold, all very suitable pieces of infrastructure. And I do think it's relevant that even at this date, as we speak today, ore is being moved upwards almost 200 kilometers across this camp. So discoveries here are very relevant for all the infrastructure holders. And because of the infrastructure, I think it really does a significant job of lowering the economic threshold of something that might become something that's feasible to build. So this is where we work. I'm going to speak today chiefly about Goldarm. Anders is as well, and then we'll give you a brief update on Penn. I think the statement at the bottom, this is a need for feed in this camp, is exceptionally relevant. Even things at 500,000 ounces at a reasonable grade and open pit are relevant to the producers here. So we'll emphasize the infrastructure, the people, the endowment, and where we work on this slide. Now, moving to the Goldarm property, which is out east of Timmins. This was first consolidated back in around 2021 with the purchase from IEP, Lionel and Peter, prospectors and private company in Timmins, and their shareholders and partners of ours as we go forward. Montclair is to the west of the land position. Interesting deposit, advanced, and we're still doing some network on it. Out to the east of it, Aljo is the target we're spending most of our time on these days. And you can see its location in proximity to some of the larger mines around you. And I think it's relevant just to flag some of the geology here. This is the main Porcupine-Destor Fault zone down on the bottom of us. The Pipestone break would be this certainly one up here. Also a very large regional break. So when we speak about Aljo, it's about a kilometer north of the Pipestone break. Very good access. This road down on the bottom here, highway going out east to Timmins. So truly within a couple of kilometers of a highway, and power and people. Aljo is a great place to make a relevant discovery. I would flag Black Fox is probably the most proximal producing asset. It's owned by McEwen. And some good results put out by McEwen just recently in terms of some of their exploration results at Grey Fox and Black Fox. Taylor and some of the assets owned by Agnico Eagle also sit fairly proximal to us. There's a mill owned by McEwen at the Stock Mill Complex. So I think you get the picture here. This is a very infrastructure-rich area. It's well endowed in terms of its gold deposits. Just to the east of us, you'd have Ben Gib and Moneta. Just to the west of us, you have things like Clavos and Go West, which is currently under development by a private company. So great place to make a discovery. Lots of infrastructure around us. And we're going to speak, first of all, about Aljo. Anders, I'll turn it over to you to speak about the great exploration results put forward here at Aljo.
Great. Thanks, Brian. So we're hi to everybody. Again, great to be here and talking to everybody about our drill programs. As Brian mentioned, we actually have a drill turning at the moment at Aljo. Just started up last week, and so here we're just looking at a plan map on the left and a cross section on the right of holes that we drilled in the previous program. So the results that we put out a couple weeks ago would be 9.9 grams over 3 meters. Those would be obviously economic grades that very pleased to see. And on the cross section here, you can see 3 main zones in the Aljo area. So the hanging wall zone near surface, the main zone that's just down from that is what hosts, some of the highest grades we've seen in the Aljo area, 23 over 7.6. The hanging wall zone, 14 over 7. And both, all with good visible gold throughout the zones, which is good. And then further into the footwall, we do see a visible gold bearing zone as well that we've hit 3 times now, 1 high grade and 2 low to moderate grade, which is good to see that continuity. So I think, when we look at, the plan for what we're going to be doing at Aljo, it's really stepping down dip from previous programs. So the first hole that we're drilling is kind of a deeper step out down the dip of this area, and just trying to 100 to 200 meter step outs, but also infilling on some of the high grade intercepts that we've had within the Aljo area, and then stepping out laterally. We've had success in drilling new zones that essentially we didn't know were there. So just really pleased to see, what we've, been able to drill over the last couple of years at Aljo in an area that's had historical underground mining.
Yeah, I'll probably just add one thing to that, Anders, is, when we speak just specifically about the results from last week, this hole 14 was flagged as a highlight. And as he said, there was an interesting intercept here at 10 grams over 3 meters. And it seems, well, you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of lower grade and not as wide as some of the big intercepts that GFG put out in the first round. But we have to go back and think about, anything above like 10, 15 gram meters, 5 grams over 3 meters, those are economic hits. And so when you're seeing 10 grams over 3 meters, the average head grade these days is about 2.5 grams in this camp. Average mining widths are underground are kind of 4 or 5 meters. So this is a really solid hit for a first hole off on the west side. And I also flagged that, there was other zones down this hole that also had 10 grams in it and 6 grams as well as the 10 gram intercept. So, 3 intercepts above 5 grams in a single hole is really, really encouraging. And when we just think about the zones, the cross-section Anders talked about was the main zone, the hanging wall zone, and the footwall zone. But going off to the northwest is an area where we have now 4 holes completed. And this area out here is what we're really referring to as the northwest zone. And it's not just the mineralization we put out in the last week, but it's also some preceding holes. So we're quite encouraging, even these ones that were sort of pushing 2 grams over 18 meters, 1.4 grams over 20 meters. Those are really encouraging signs of a system that's quite robust. And we're a couple hundred meters away from the historic mine workings here. So I think what we've seen here, specifically at Aljo in the release that we put out last week, was really encouraging. Even hole 16 may not jump out at most guys. When you read it, you're like, oh, it's a gram. Look, this was a step out hole on the other side of a major dike, on the other side of a shear zone, where there was very, very limited drilling. We still found up to 3 grams out here. It's not a high grade hit so far, but when you step out, you still see the system. Those are all really encouraging things. So Anders, I'll let you keep going on some of the other slides here in the program going forward.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so here we're looking at some visible gold in the drill core from the June drill program. And so, from a metallurgical standpoint, very encouraging to see this, right off the bat. The visible gold is very coarse. You see it in these, brittle fractures, quartz carbonate veins associated with the altered mafic that are hosting the bulk of the mineralization at the Aljo mine. So, visually, right away, if you're going to have good results or not in general here. And it certainly helps, speed up the timing of, okay, where are we going to go next? What are we going to test? And how do we follow up these intercepts even before assays are back? So, very encouraging from a metallurgical standpoint. And again, all of the results that we've put out in the last couple of years have been from above 200, 250 vertical meters. So we've still only tested the system very shallow. We've had economic intercepts even at depths where we know there was underground mining. And so we're finding and hitting mineralization outside of what was historically mined, which is always great to see when you're going back to an area with previous mining. So just in terms of the Q4 program here, we're looking at essentially a plan map of all of the holes that we've drilled, including those released last week in black with the red circles on the drill hole collars. And then the program that we've just kicked off, which is about 2,500 meters, that, at least the majority of we expect to finish before Christmas. Those are shown in the white drill hole traces. So, you can see we are drilling some holes, directly in the vicinity of the Aljo mine workings. We'll step out about 100, 150 meters below the last hole that we hit on, which was hole 12. And then we'll infill a little bit and step out kind of in the hanging wall zone and the main zone, pushing all the way through to the footwall with a couple of the deeper holes. You might see most of the holes generally going north-south, a little bit west of that. And then you'll see, two holes that are actually going at 90 degrees, so a right angle to the rest of the drilling. This is really, for us, just, looking at, can we understand, the vein orientation better? And let's make sure that we know we have two vein orientations here. So one generally northeast, and one, at about west-north or north-northwest. And so the idea with those holes is, if we have, a north-south oriented vein, we're going to be essentially drilling down the dip of it with the north-south holes. So by putting these other holes, just a couple of them at 90 degrees, it allows us to get a better look at some of those, high-angle veins that we generally wouldn't be seeing with the north-south holes. And I think if you go back to, some drilling campaigns, historically, particularly around Canada, where you might have started early with an idea in your head about the vein orientation and then not tested other models, it can come back to bite you. So I think it's a healthy part of an early stage program to drill a couple holes that are, at higher angles to your other ones, and just make sure you've got the orientations right. We'll be putting a camera down a few of these holes this month to ensure that we can photograph the veins within the borehole itself. And that, along with the oriented core data that we also get, that allows us to give this to a structural geologist and really pull it apart and flesh out the vein orientation so that we know we're using the best drilling, angles and basically optimizing the program. So I think, with the program that we're in right now, the idea is pull, the existing drill intercepts that we have at Aljo main, hanging wall, and footwall down dip, step out on strike. And then, with the holes in the northwestern area that Brian alluded to, let's go have a better look at that area. Drill underneath some of the deeper intercepts where we did have, 2 grams over 20 meters, things like that, with high grade intervals, and test some of those other high grade intercepts that we've had. On top of that, we've got one hole to the northeast that will drill under some historical drill intercepts that were 6 grams per ton gold over 5 meters. And so, those are economic intercepts in any camp. And, just learning more about the system with a little bit more of an aggressive take down dip and along strike and get a better idea of how many ounces we can see here conceptually, and how well do these intercepts hold together.
No, that's good, Anders. And I think what I'd hope people take home is this is a pretty aggressive program. 11 holes, 2,500 meters. We've only drilled 15 holes so far at Aljo, so it's still really early days in this system. But we are seeing scale. Just to give you a distance, that's kind of like 600 meters across here. So we're seeing some good scale, lots of mineralized veins, two main vein orientations, and we're still just testing this relatively shallow so far. So we see lots of potential to grow this. That's where the release was from just last week in terms of the exploration results on Goldarm and Aljo specifically. And, you get a sense of scale of the land position that GFG has when I talked to you about Aljo. And Aljo is this little star way out here, out east of Timmins. It's about 50 or 60 kilometers out there. But we also own 800 square kilometers in here. And we went to Timmins, put these district scale land positions together, and sometimes exploration takes longer, and it takes a few phases to start understanding some targets. And when we think about our history at Penn is out west of Timmins. It's literally 100 kilometers from Goldarm, but it's right along the highway. It's between Borden and the main Timmins camp. It's all the same geology as we see at Penn, as in Timmins, and certainly we see some analogies we can even draw out to Borden as well. So I'm going to talk to you about, and Anders is going to speak to you about the Muskego target, a little bit of an update of where we sit. Muskego sits at the west end of Penn, and it's a target that we're actually peppering to drill in Q1 of next year. When we think of our philosophy of exploration within GFG, we're the first company that's ever put this land package together. And we show you it on a map here, and it looks maybe reasonably small, but that's 60 kilometers across this belt. And, we bought companies, we bought purchase and sale agreements on lands and claims to put this all together. We put it all together knowing that we can explore this better if we have the whole land package together. We can apply techniques that groups haven't done here before. And we can use this regional exploration technology, till exploration. It's essentially sampling the till to look for a gold deposit, to look underneath the cover. And this is the opportunity at Timmins where there's only, 3, 4, 5% of this area that's outcropping. So 95% of this area is covered in till, anywhere from 2 to 40 meters of till. And that's the challenge, but it's also the opportunity. So we'd explored Penn for a few years, and all these little triangles here were samples we took at the till. We found new gold systems like Slate Rock, and Slate Rock was a really exciting system and still has potential to grow and be interesting to us. But we couldn't float GFG just on greenfield work, so we brought Aljo in. We're growing Aljo as a deposit, and we kept on working away. And what Anders is going to speak to you is the Muskego target. It's out on the west end, and these little blue squares, the lines, were sonic holes that we ran out into a large swamp. And you kind of lose scale of this map, but the area I'm highlighting to you, it's about 30 square kilometers, that area. And it's a large swamp. It's a interesting geological setting at the end of the Greenstone Belt. And so when we thought about the most prospective areas of Penn, this Muskego area was always an area we liked geologically, but it was the toughest target, knowing that it was under a fairly extensive cedar swamp. And so that was the use of the sonic profiles 2 years ago to evaluate it, generated a whole new suite of targets, and we're really going to focus on that area. So this map now zooms in to where you see, and I'll turn it over to Anders to speak towards maybe the plans at Muskego this year, why we're so excited about it. We can show you some pictures of some gold we now have out of the core, which is really fascinating. So Anders, maybe give them a preview of what our plans are at Muskego.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. So like Brian said, we're looking at this map on the western side of the Penn property where, the western Abitibi on the whole, you've got all this entire Abitibi province that spans a large swath of, Ontario and Quebec. This western Abitibi is where, these mafic volcanic package is in green, and the sedimentary basins, the Porcupine Basin, very important, for gold mineralization across the Abitibi. These things pinch off together at the tail end of the Greenstone Belt on the west side, just before you get over to the Kapuskasing break that hosts the 5+ million ounce Borden deposit. So a really intriguing setting, very similar to Kirkland Lake. And this area, the Curratison deposit, this would be a very similar setting to that. So that's why we liked it so much, as Brian mentioned. What we're looking at here in the blue squares, as Brian said, are sonic bedrock holes. So these holes are, pretty large, diameter holes, probably about 6-7 inches, and these are drilled vertically right down through the till. They sample all of the till, mainly looking at the basal till for gold, but they also go about 1.5 meters into bedrock. And so on this scale, across, the eastern half of the Muskego swamp at a 250 meter space center, you're expecting to see, hopefully some of the right rocks, maybe a little bit of alteration in the rocks. If you're lucky, maybe a little bit of sulfide, but the spacing is so wide, it would be like drilling a hole here and going over 2 blocks and drilling another hole and expecting to see some of the right ingredients. And so I think the special part about, what was done in 2022 with this program is that you actually intersected, 2.5 grams per ton gold over 1.5 meters in that bedrock sample. And so when we go and we'll have a look at some of these, rocks, you're always excited when you see a result like this on this spacing in this environment, but I think it was what we saw on the rocks later. And so, we'll talk a little bit about that, but, so to set the story, we've got 2.5 grams over 1.5 meters, 1.3 kilometers away along a high strain zone, a deformation zone that we've mapped out through magnetic interpretation. You've got this 45 gold grain hill sample, and, that's Brian's circled here on the screen in the red triangle. What's important about that is that sample, it did have 45, gold grains in it, but 100% of those grains were pristine. And that's very rare. That means that you're very close to a gold source in that the gold grains were not abraded by transport or anything like that. They're basically pristine and you're very close to the source. So when we track that, bedrock anomaly along the strain zone and move 1.3 kilometers to the northeast, and we see a golden till hit with very pristine grains, it tells us that this is a very fertile shear zone. And of course, we don't have much information, but this whole corridor now for us has become very interesting. And, to be honest, you can go an entire career and not have a target of this scale under a swamp where not a single person's ever prospected and not a single drill hole has ever tested the system. And so that's what we have, at this moment here. And I think that's why, there's so much enthusiasm for the target. Not only did you see some sulfide, not only did you see the right rocks, but, you had a 2+ gram per ton intercept. And that's just very, very rare to do that. In the same area, if you look at this transect circled just to the northeast of Muskego, we also have some really interesting geology. So when we went back and reinterpreted some of the bedrock samples that were taken 3 years ago, what we found was that we have some really interesting rocks, some fragmental rocks that could be conglomerates or they could be volcanic fragmental rocks. So those are really, important from a Timmins gold generative model and structural setting scale. And then we also saw quartz porphyries. And so, these quartz porphyries, they're all over Timmins, just off of the main breaks. And they're very important, maybe not so much from a genetic gold perspective, but they set the plumbing setting and they create locuses for gold mineralization along major structures. So whenever you have these types of intrusions along major structures in the Abitibi, particularly this close to the Porcupine-Dester Fault, which is about 1.5 kilometers to the south of us, it puts you in a very, very good setting for gold mineralization. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit of a background of what we're seeing. If we look at this area in a cross section, so now we've taken an east-west slice through the ground, right on that Muskego B sonic line. And so we're looking at the gold sample on the second hole from the left, which is Muskego B05. And you can see in there, the Bedrock sample is highlighted by the pink box there. And that's where, we intersected the gold within the Bedrock. What's really interesting about this particular hole is that when we looked at the basal till, so going back to the till sampling that we did across the property and looked at the heavy minerals in the sample, though that till profile, that till sample that was sitting directly on top of Bedrock is highly anomalous in scheelite, which is a tungsten-bearing mineral, wolframite, another tungsten-bearing mineral, bismuth, and tellurium. And those three are some of the strongest orogenic gold pathfinders that you'll find anywhere, associated with these systems. So if you go to West Africa, Birimian deposits, Western Australia, South Africa, and many places in the Abitibi and shield rocks, and look at gold systems, within the orogenic systems, they will very often have that gold pathfinder setting. And so to see this, these gold pathfinders highly associated and elevated with respect to gold pathfinders directly in contact with that rock that's also grading gold, that puts those two in direct contact and creates a very interesting story. That's how mines are found, right? To be honest, right? You find this, association, and then the next question is, okay, well, you've got the right association, you've got Bedrock. How big can this thing be? So having a look at these Bedrock samples, here's 4 different slices, and what stands out right away is just the amount of sulfide in them. So this kind of gold color, most of this is pyrrhotite. So we do have, some petrography, some mineral assemblage work done on this, but majority of this is pyrrhotite with lesser chalcopyrite and sphalerite, a zinc-bearing mineral. And so, when we looked at these with some instrumentation, some ICP work, what we found is, some pretty high grade, so up to 17 grams per ton gold associated with the sulfide. And so that's obviously very promising. There is, visible gold in these samples as well, very fine, but it's certainly there. And so just visually, when we generated the target in terms of going back and finding the data, pulled it, and then looked at the rocks and saw what they looked like, you've got quartz veining, you've got, very ductile fabrics where you have these really nice sulfide-rich bands wrapping around these kind of, quartz lithons, these ovoid quartz things that have been pulled apart in this high strain zone. I think for Brian and I and the team here, that was when we were like, okay, this is more than just a geologic anomaly. This could be something very significant. And, to be honest, this is probably up there with, some of the most intriguing targets that Brian and I have tested together, going back 13, 14 years to the Claude days. So for us, it's very, very exciting. And just to see, the mineralogy now that we're starting to get a better handle on, is really, really interesting. So what we're looking at here is a thin section. So you've got a fraction of a millimeter, thin section of those rocks that we just looked at on the previous slide. And now we're looking at the sulfide species. So dominantly, like I said, pyrrhotite was the dominant mineral in the area with 20-25% sulfide overall in the samples. What's really interesting here is that, sandwiched between 2 sphalerite, so zinc-bearing sulfide grains that are kind of in the dark blue, you've got a really nice, a gold flake or whatever you want to call it, mineral form interstitial between the sphalerite grains. So what it looks like in the petrography and in the mineral work that we have so far is that gold is likely associated with the pyrrhotite and the chalcopyrite, and you see all of those phases here in this setting. So really interesting. Great to see the free gold in the system. That's exactly what you need to see at this scale. We are going to continue and do more work on these samples, but this is just something that came in back in the last few days, and this is the first bit of mineralogical work at a microscope scale on the petrography that's ever been done at Muskego. So we're obviously pretty excited to see this. Okay, just stepping out regionally again. The Muskego setting here. So the backdrop here is a magnetic map from our 2018 magnetic survey across Penn. What we came up with was Brian and I trying to think about, okay, how do we get more out of this target? How do we pull more out of the data? And so we went back to a electromagnetic airborne survey that was done by the OGS in 1989. And so we pulled those data in, and we were able to see a few things that were really interesting. So just in the block model that we see on the bottom right, we're looking at a reinterpretation of the 2018 magnetic data, and we're looking at a vertical slice through that area, and we're kind of looking oblique to the northeast. And so you can see on the block model there, the white dots are all of the holes that were drilled in the sonic program across the swamp, and the golden bedrock one, we're highlighting it here. And so when we did this, inversion of the magnetic data in the last couple months, we needed to get a handle on, okay, we know there's a lot of pyrrhotite in these rocks, so the rock is going to be magnetic. We can see that, with our instrumentation. And we also, know that it's going to be conductive because pyrrhotite is a conductive sulfide. And so what we wanted to get here was, okay, how do we approach it? How do we drill it? Can we get a dip off of the magnetic data? And so this shows, a very steep dip, to the southeast, and it matches the fabric of the rock that we saw in the bedrock sample, which is good. And so now we can, think we can see this, kind of geologic domain, this area within the magnetic imaging, which is great. What we also pulled, like I said, was the EM data, and it would be, similar to VTEM, that's a bit more modern now. And what we found is a sizable VTEM anomaly, 600 meters long, about 100 meters off of the trend where we have this golden bedrock. So we don't have any other samples in this area, for what we're looking at. You can see the golden bedrock located. We think we're on a high strain zone that, is about northeasterly, so kind of right on that linear magnetic trend. And now we've got a pretty strong EM anomaly that you're actually seeing through a swamp, which generally tends to mute those signals, but we're still seeing it as quite a strong signal. And so now we've got a conductive anomaly with a magnetic anomaly with gold mineralization along a high strain zone. And so for us, going back 6 months to when we kind of started, to put the data together here, I think every layer that we've tried to bring into the fold and try to understand Muskego better has only added to our enthusiasm and brought things together instead of, kind of tearing it apart, which is, the scientific process that you have to go through. But I think from our side, very encouraged to see all the right things coming together and the target making sense from a geologic perspective. So this is one of my favorite pictures. Mark and Brian were good enough to put it on the intro slide. So that's what we were looking. We were looking directly west, a few hundred feet up. This is a drone picture, looking oblique at the Muskego swamp. So now you're standing on the Penn property, hovering above the ground. You're looking straight to the west, and you can see actually the drill trail from 2022 that was cut through the swamp in the winter. And the samples are 250 meters spaced across. So this is just to bring in some of the features, the VTEM, the magnetic anomaly, and the high strain zone shown in yellow here. And instead of showing it on a map, try to visualize it from, if you were there, this is what you'd actually be seeing. And so, at a 250 meter space sampling, you hit 2.5 grams per ton in that location with the gold triangle. So I think for me, when you try to explain the scale of a target, it's really hard. Maps look really small, and you always just kind of default to the scale you're looking at. But here you can see the river in the background. The Penn property ends, a couple kilometers beyond the river here. But this is a huge area. The swamp is like 4 by 10 kilometers wide, and it's a massive area. There's no drill holes within anything that you can see here in the area. And particularly, there's no, prospecting ever done. There's no outcrop. And so, this is why, GFG was formed to come, into a large belt, put this type of land package together and go out and test your best targets. So, very exciting, but this is a great slide to visualize where we actually are.
Thanks for that, Anders. And so he's done a great job of talking to you about one of the targets at Muskego. And just for scale, the area we looked at would have been kind of showing you about this distance. So you can generally see about 1 kilometer off that drone. That's one of the targets. But when we stand back and think conceptually about many of these belts and how gold deposits form, we also have strong signatures to the north in Sonic Line A. So up in this environment, these rocks also look very interesting. Structurally great area, strong gold intil with the right pathfinders, altered diorites, all the right signs in that next line. That's 1 kilometer to the north. These 2 lines to the south also show indications of both tungsten and gold signatures associated with east-west structural corridors. Also very good structural settings. Other concepts that we put out there is like, if we have these fertile structures come through, what happens when they come up against the basin contact, which is, we all know, a major deformation corridor and structural break. So this is the real big picture of what Muskego comes across as. It's a district scale target. There's 4 or 5 6 different targets here, and we're going to start testing these in Q1 of this year. So when we stand back and think about GFG as a whole, and many holders of ours might ask us, why are you trying to do so much? Why not just focus on Aljo? So we started this presentation speaking about great results at Aljo, and it's our first priority, and we're drilling here in 2024. I expect us to have great results in this year, but we are in the planning phases of next year. And as we look about what 2025 may bring us at GFG, I think you're going to see us continue to push at Goldarm and continue to push Aljo to say, can we get this thing to something that's, a resource stage target and a good aggressive program, testing down to about 500 meters vertical and advancing that regional pipeline at Goldarm. That still sits in our priority basket. And then we add in Penn and Muskego next year, and advancing not just the core of the Muskego target, which is that one conductivity mag anomaly with gold and bedrock, but also building the other greenfield targets into a drill stage target, which is either geophysics or more geochemistry, and continue to work across that Muskego area. The one property we didn't speak about was Doré, and Doré is still fascinating. It sits between 20 million ounces at Cote and 5 million ounces at Borden, and it's a 200 square kilometer package. So Doré is not irrelevant in our pipeline. But when we think about pipeline and capital allocation, there's no coincidence that we talk about these and show these boxes in this scale. Goldarm and Aljo, Muskego, and Doré. That's really the vision we see pushing ourselves forward into 2025. So when I think about GFG going for gold, gift from God, whichever one you want to take, we've set about putting together an immense land package in Timmins. And 5-6 years of work. This doesn't come short time frame. It takes a lot of work and thought, changing of people at times. But these are truly district scale assets and district scale targets that are extremely captivating and I think have good potential to yield the next great discovery. It doesn't come, though, without strong people. And I think the reason we do these presentations and host webinars is convey to our shareholders and stakeholders that here's a technical team, here's what we're doing technically, here's the sort of the thesis behind and the science behind our methodology and results. And I think you can see we're a very strong technical team. And when we think about being a strong technical team, you also need this capital piece. The whole warrant exercise piece and stronger balance sheet allows us to get good runway and traction and to go test these targets for the next sort of 12, 18, 24 months without going back to the market. So I really feel it's a great statement, very strong shareholders. The feedback we've had from the warrant exercise, anybody that writes a check to exercise a warrant share is showing their support for us. So I think that piece is very compelling. And we're also owners. So we'll own about 5% of the company. We do our best to put the dollars into the ground, and compensation's all public, but it's about $1 million a year to run this company, and everything else goes into the ground in terms of exploration to the Timmins. And, as we think about investing in GFG, go back and think about Timmins as a camp. 2, 5, 10, 20 million ounce deposits are scattered across this camp. And it is one of the most well-endowed areas that still offers immense discovery potential. So, I think Timmins is just a great place for us to focus on. And I really think with GFG, you see a very technical, very driven, and a well-funded exploration company. So with that, we'll wrap up, and happy to take any questions you may have.
Amazing. Thank you for the thorough presentation, gentlemen. 14 minutes for Q&A. For anyone that just entered, feel free to submit your questions. I have about 12 in the queue, so it'll be a little rapid fire here to get through them all. We'll start with the chat here regarding Doug's question. Just curious if there are any whiffs of economic silver.
We assay for silver. I wouldn't say there's anything economic. Economic silver is, needs to be 100 gram plus silver numbers. So you generally will see a 10-to-1 ratio in gold and orogenic systems, gold to silver. So 10-to-1, 5 grams, you're seeing, a gram or so of silver. So I wouldn't say to date we've seen anything on an economic concentration of silver, nor have we really seen it in the petro. That being said, you do see it as a pathfinder. Geochemically, it's there in the till. Geochemically, it's there in the soils and the rocks. So we use the silver data as a proxy for gold, but to date, nothing economic.
Thank you. Mike is looking for confirmation regarding drilling at Muskego. Given that it's a swamp, it must be in the winter.
Anders, go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. So we're actually working with contractors right now to set up, start packing snow, making ice in areas that we want, and just grooming the trails and things like that at Muskego. But exactly right, Mike. This will be a Q1 target, so we would be very pleased to see drilling at Muskego, late in January, early to mid-Feb.
The other, I guess, follow on to that, Anders, is also that, you do have portions of those targets. There's 5 or 6 targets that could be tested throughout the year. And, it does become, it's a cost trade-off, right? So if we wanted to drill, let's just say we went out there and had great success and we wanted to follow up in Q2 and Q3, we can do that. It will just cost us more money in terms of putting a platform out there and an elevated drill cost. So, to do it most efficiently, January, February, March, April. If you wanted to test it throughout the year, achievable, just going to cost us some more.
Gotcha. Now, your team noted that the current drilling at Aljo only tested around 250 meters, while your new program would target depths of up to 400 meters. What geological indicators give you confidence about the potential mineralization at these deeper levels?
Yeah, I think just the analogy to most orogenic systems and using Timmins deposits as an example, those deposits, they start at surface. The deepest ones are almost down, pushing 2 kilometers. You go down Hollinger and you go down to look at Hoyle Pond. Those are deep systems that have roots down 1.5 kilometers plus. So nothing in the systems tell us that that there won't be vertical continuity. So as we look to explore Aljo, an obvious place to find continuity is at depth. And certainly we're quite excited to step out in the program that we have now and at full anticipation of the veins and the results we've seen continuing at depth.
The press release mentions multiple distinct zones: footwall, main, hanging wall, and now the northwest zone. Could you help us understand the structural relationship between these zones and whether you see any particular zone emerging as potentially more significant than the others?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this a bit ourselves too about trying not to confuse the market. So we have the Aljo mine, and the Aljo mine, as we've defined it right now, has a hang wall zone, a main zone, and a footwall zone, and those are all directly associated with the proximal footprint of what was mined historically. The old mining was really just the main zone. And if we had to say the area that's most focused for us, that's where we saw the high grade intercept coming back into August and September. We're in that main zone of the Aljo mine. Those sit structurally above us. The hanging wall one is in the hanging wall, the footwall one's in the footwall, and those are all generally oriented either northeast or northwest. When we step out to the northwest, several hundred meters away, there's a group of veins out there. We're calling them the northwest zone. And hole 14 showed 3 different intercepts above 5 grams associated with that northwest zone. Previous drilling last year had 20-meter intercepts at 1.5 grams to 2 grams. The relationship of those still yet to be determined, but we've grouped that whole area as the northwest zone. So that's the relationship between the 4 various zones as we've outlined them. And to date, so far, the most promising area has been the Aljo mine, and particularly the main zone of that target area.
Thank you. So you've intersected multiple stacked vein sets in several holes. Could you please explain why this is important, and does this influence your approach as you advance the 2 resource definition?
Yeah, when we think about it, and I'll just go back to some of the mines I've worked in historically. When you start seeing stacked veins, it tells you A, the system's quite robust. B, they're parallel to each other. So if you just think about capital intensity, the dollars per ounce of gold to recover it, you can be much more efficient with your capital. And so to me, some of the most profitable mines in the world have high ounce per vertical meter and high grades. And we're seeing stacked veins here. If you continue to show continuity and you have stacked veins, you generally start creating something that has high ounce per vertical meter. And those are good signs of an economic ore body. So it's a reflection of the system, which is positive, and it's a reflection in direct correlation with kind of capital intensity and economics of future development should we get there. So those are the real reasons we really like the stacked vein scenario.
This next question actually ties in with your answer rather nicely. How does Aljo compare to other major deposits in the Timmins camp, and can you please expand more on the system's depth potential?
Yeah, lots of similarities. Anders talked about the mafic host rocks at Muskego, but obviously Aljo as well, mafic, ultramafic host rocks, the quartz veins, the visible gold. These porphyries, they just hang around the ore bodies, and whether they're genetically or spatially or empirically related to them, one or all of the above is often the conclusion. So the porphyry association is still quite good at Aljo. Proximity to a big break. So you generally need plumbing, and the pipestone break offers you that plumbing system. And here we sit, about 1 kilometer away from it. So lots of analogies to the main Timmins systems at Aljo, and using that analogy, many of those systems have deep roots and continuity to depth to justify, shaft infrastructure down the line. So I think lots of the geology directly analogous to Timmins, and the depth potential of those systems we see as well at Aljo.
Thanks, Brian. I believe you might have touched on this topic on your second last slide, but the system has obviously grown significantly. Can you explain how do you plan to balance following up on these high-grade intercepts versus testing the numerous other targets on your Goldarm property in 2025?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I think, into next year, we've got, a rough outline for, 4,000 meters at Aljo to follow up on, results that we'll have here in December. And so really that is, get it closer to a resource stage, right, in the main part of Aljo. So let's advance to that, next phase, which would be, preliminary resource, if we can get there, stepping down dip on the veins, looking at other areas and trying to build that, together. So that's what, we're really looking to do at Aljo, is get to that next phase. And then at Muskego, it's to really go out and test it on, for the first time. So if we can be successful with the first couple of hits, which would be kind of, targeting right below this bedrock anomaly, then we can step out and get into the next phase of our drill program and really start to explore, strike continuity, different targets. And we're not going to focus too much on one area to begin with. I think, when you're in a district, setting, you always get further ahead by testing a bigger area early and then focusing on when you have a better idea of what you have actually got. So it'll definitely be twofold, between Aljo and Muskego in 2025. Hopefully we have more success at each target and we can grow our drill programs based on success. That would be obviously best case scenario.
But Aljo looks like it could be a success. Why don't you just focus there for now?
I think going back to, Brian and I's approach to, district setting, building a pipeline, when you're trying to build a pipeline, something robust, and get as many targets pushed up the pipeline, to a resource stage as possible, it's great to have one target, right? That's looking like Aljo. That's what we really hope for. But if you push a number of targets together at the same time, some of them will, no doubt, fall to the wayside and not quite work out. But the more targets you push in the pipeline and pay attention to earlier on, the more success you're going to have with those one or two. As we know, the odds are never with you in this business, right? So by having a robust pipeline and ranking our targets and looking at it, from a geologic and economic perspective, we do a much better job of advancing the right targets at the right time for GFG. So great to have one good target, but Brian and I came from working in a mining complex where you've got hundreds of targets, and it's not easy to always pick the best one. So we will take a very broad approach to the work, generate multiple targets, and advance 1, 2, 3, 4, to resource if we can. But by pushing them all and giving them all a fair chance, you do the best job for your company and for your portfolio in terms of getting the best targets to the end, goal.
As we're nearing the end of this discussion, you, Anders, did do a thorough presentation regarding Muskego, but an individual did ask, from all the data on Muskego, can you please explain in plain language why you're so excited about this target?
I would just say, take any gold system in the world that's a mine, randomly put dots over the gold system on a line that are 200 meters spaced across, and tell me the percentage of times you actually intersect or grade within that gold deposit. I would guess it would happen maybe 1 or 2% of the time, right? Outside of the massive systems that have kilometer scales of mineralization, those ones are very rare. If we went back to the CB camp or Santoy camp and put, this type of spacing blind, right? You don't have any outcrop to deal with, and put that type of spacing across, I'd be surprised if you even hit the right rock package, let alone any gold in the sample. So that would be the first thing I would say, and it's kind of what we talk about a lot here, is just the chances of hitting, 2+ grams per ton at that spacing. That's the very first one. And then when you add in the structural setting, the geologic setting, you're 1.6 kilometers north of the Porcupine-Dester Fault here, you're in the western Abitibi, you've got quartz porphyry intrusions and all the right rocks in the area with the alteration and the gold. It's a very compelling target, but I just go back to that. What is the chance of hitting gold in a mineralized system at that spacing on first pass, blind over a swamp? I'll tell you, it's almost nothing. So, that's what I would say.
Gentlemen, we have 1 more minute here. Are you guys, is it a hard stop, or could I ask a couple more questions?
No, I just think keep asking the questions there, Kyle.
Sure. Okay, so I'll go back to the chat for a couple here. ScanFix is wondering regarding the assays. They've taken a long time to be reported. I noticed XRF assays on Muskego. How accurate have XRF been to be have been to the slower assays so far. On Q4 drilling, will you report XRF figures possibly before lab results?
They're really just qualitative. They're not quantitative. So for gold, the reason we did XRF was simply to tell us, is there gold associated with the pyrrhotite? So it's not a compliant assay method. They're not to be relied upon. They're just, is there gold there or not? So you're never gonna see us report assays from an XRF like from a press release.
Mm-hmm.
We use it from a technical understanding. So as opposed to waiting for a month, we may get at least an indication of gold associated with the sulfide. So don't look for us to report them technically. It's an exploration tool we use. We report it in a presentation like this because it gives us confidence and actually better understanding of the system.
Gotcha. And ScanFix, just as a follow-up question, when you assay, do you assay for pathfinders as well?
Go ahead, Anderson.
So yes, we do. So we will do a fire assay for gold, but we will also do a full IPT suite, which would be, base metals, and minor elements as well. So there's a suite of 36 elements that we get, including all the base metals, gold and silver. You also get in that package, but that's only a partial digestion. So that's to be used, qualitatively and not quantitatively. But yes, we do get full pathfinders in all of the prospecting, all of the till sampling, and all of the drilling.
Thank you. Stephen Parsons is inquiring, while early days for Muskego, is there a geological analog, brackets Abitibi or elsewhere, that is being considered and informing your views on the target and guiding plans for exploration?
Yeah, I mean, this one evolves a little bit in time. We do see good analogies, and Anders spoke about porphyry association, the direct contact to the or proximal contact to the Porcupine Basin, the quartz veins, even the Pathfinder signature. The other piece that's relevant here is these diorites kicking around many of the host rocks. So both Borden and Cote are dioritic associated host rocks in stratigraphy. So we can see analogies in the host rock and the host ores to things like Borden. We can see some host rock analogies to Cote, but we also see direct affinities to, the controlling structural orientations when you think about things like a Hoyle Pond, where there you're on a sedimentary contact basin or proximal to it, and you're on this northeast oriented structure, which we are on at Muskego, and you're sitting proximal to a mafic ultramafic contact. All those analogies are present at Bell Creek and Hoyle Pond in the main Timmins camp. So, I wouldn't say there's a specific or direct analogy. What I would say is we see affinities to all the systems around us.
Gotcha. Mike has a question in the chat here. First round of drilling in Muskego is early Feb. Could there be a second round in April when still frozen?
When you think about this target, well, let me just think about logistics. April and May are often tough, and they're tough because it's wet, swampy. It's spring, it's mucky. So, what I'd like to see us do is get the first phase done January, February, March. If we go back out there in as a phase 2, my guess is it's probably into summertime, and we would look to do it off a different exploration platform, as opposed to something that's in April. That's just early stage, Mike. So, let's see what the results come back with, and how urgently we want to get back up there and follow up them. What I can say is that if we step out to Muskego and have, some good results there, we're going to do our best to get back out there as quick as we can.
Thank you. I have 3 more questions here. One, who made the decision to make the latest assay announcements, and what was the logic for the timing that resulted in no apparent interest at the time?
Yeah, I saw that one come in. It's interesting. So when we think about disclosure, we want to get, the relevant pieces to our shareholders, in a reasonable amount of time. This particular lease was compounded by the desire to get the rig turning again in Timmins before we put this thing out. And at Aljo, we wanted to make the statement and be confident to say, yes, we've achieved everything we need from a logistics and getting out there and drilling here's the results, and the rig's turning there. So the timing perspective of the release and the impact of a U.S. shareholder, I think probably feels it was pretty muted because it was a U.S. Thanksgiving holiday that week, and you generally have lesser uptake on that time period. So there was a cognizance of that. Ideally, we would have started this program a couple weeks earlier. There were some logistical and input sort of parameters that prevented that, and so we weren't able to get the release out. In the end, the timing of the press releases is always management's call. So we'll own that timing. I think this was a trade-off where there could have been better timing earlier or later. But this is when we started the program, so that's really what drove us when we wanted to put the press release out.
Then just two more questions regarding financials. Could you provide an update on the rattlesnake sale?
We're moving to try to close rattlesnake in the next week or two. Under the agreement, there was 120 days post signing of the definitive agreement to close the deal. That 120 days is up here in mid-December, so I expect us to move to closure. And I've seen final draft components of the agreement and closing documents that have been moving through various lawyers. So I expect to see that in the next couple of weeks, and that's important. It brings in 1.2 million of cash. It opens up about $300,000 of bond refund, so 1.5 million of cash back to us. It provides us an equity position in the resulting vehicle that we sold the asset to, and it solidifies the path to move into transfer the asset. So good, important step for GFG, hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
And final questions regarding warrants. If all the warrants come in, what will the cash balance be at the end of the year?
So let's just take, there's $3.8 million of warrants. If we had 90% of those warrants come in, it's $3.6 million. The cash as we sit on right now is around, $1 million to $1.2 million. Add those two numbers together, you get about 5. You add the rattlesnake in, you get about 6 and change. Maybe we'll end up with 6.5, depending on if the bond comes back in. So I'd love to see us in that sort of 6 plus or minus range at year end.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for going over the allotted time here. Any closing remarks before we close off for today?
No, just like to thank everybody for their interest. Always good to see an engaged audience and questions. Mark, myself, or Anders are always open to more feedback and conversations. Please do reach out to us in the office in Saskatoon by email, by our website. And thank you as well, Six, for putting on such a great forum, as we always seem to get good traction with these.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and thank you everyone in attendance. I'll make sure our team gets the recording up here shortly, but thank you all for joining us today.